What's up guys, welcome back to Deck Tech for Decks. Before we get into today's Deck Tech, I've got some exciting news. I'm now partnered with TCG Player, so my link will be in the description down below, so you can support me whenever you buy those magic cards that you're going to buy anyway. Additionally, if you have no magic cards to buy, you can always support me by just liking, commenting, and subscribing to the channel. I always appreciate you guys' support, and now let's get into this Deck Tech. Today's deck tech is on Vorinclex. Now, I always loved the simplicity of a mono green deck, and this guy has the simplicity of the mono green deck, the power of the mono green deck, while also bringing some complex stuff to it, right? Because we can use Plainswalkers, shove them onto the battlefield, they're going to double their counters, and we can ultimate them right away to get those broken emblems. That sounds amazing because now all of our creatures are going to have permanent +2/+2, trample, indestructible. We've got a bunch of broken Planeswalkers in here that we are going to abuse. Additionally, on the sidelines, we're just creating a lot of creatures that have a lot of counters on them and drawing a lot of cards because we have a lot of those Power Matters card draw in the deck. So if that sounds like a deck tech you want to get into, let's get into it. Let's start off by talking about those Planeswalkers, because I know that's why you guys are here. Nissa, Vital Force. This one's super solid. We ultimate right away. Now we're drawing cards whenever we're playing those lands, and then we can't overlook that -3 to get a card back from our graveyard to our hand. Super useful. Vivian Reed. This one's one of the most broken ones in my opinion. We're gonna throw onto the battlefield, immediately ultimate her, and then all of our creatures are gonna get +2/+2, vigilance, and trample, plus indestructible, because why not, for the rest of the game. Good luck interacting with those emblems, am I right? Additionally, it is some pretty solid card advantage. And removal. Honestly, an all-star in the deck. Garruk Unleashed, go ahead and just get your best creature and throw it onto the battlefield, because why not? Additionally, his +1's not terrible, but look how early we can play this guy. As long as we got our commander on the battlefield, and then we're tutoring for a creature every turn. Super solid. Ugin, the Spirit Dragon. I had to include this guy. That -10 is crazy. And then he's just a board wipe with, some damage here and there sprinkled on top. Super flexible. Nissa, who shakes the world. This girl's super solid because we're going to get those indestructible lands. We're going to get all of our lands. And then we can start animating those lands to attack our opponents with. And you know what? Why not just have double mana while we're at it? Garruk, Caller of Beasts. This one's super solid too, right? We're tutoring creatures now whenever we're casting creature cards. Additionally, card advantage on that +1, I like it. Nissa's Ascended Animist. This one's going to enter the battlefield and have 14 loyalty, and then we're going to plus it to put a 15/15 onto the battlefield. I just couldn't resist, throwing this in the deck. That -7 is nothing to scoff at either, buffing our whole board equal to the number of force we control, and then we get trample on top of it. And after all those bombs, we have this utility Planeswalker, right? Now we're just tapping our creatures for mana, which is still super solid, but he kind of pairs in comparison to the other Planeswalkers we run in the deck. Lastly, Rin and Realmbreaker. This is going to allow us to play our Planeswalkers from the graveyard, our lands, any permanents actually, and then use their ultimates again. We can just stack emblems on top of each other and be unstoppable. Moving on to the cards that put counters on our creatures, we have Tribute to the World Tree. Super solid. It can be card advantage if it's a big creature. If it's a small creature, it's going to buff it up. Notably, with our commander on the battlefield, 1/1s are going to become 5/5s, and that's going to be amazing. Master Chef, super solid. Again, same thing. We're going to put 2 counters on all of our creatures, so it works really good. Notably, it says the creature will enter with the counters on them. So for our World Tree, Elemental Bond, Garruk's Pack Leader, all of our draw spells that care about a creature having 3 power will now be set off by our 1/1s, which is super solid. Renata works super similar to this. The Great Hinge, this one triggers on ETB, and it doesn't work for our tokens, but it is solid card advantage and ramp. Serac and Goreclaw. Again, this is only going to work for our permanent creatures, but it is also going to give them haste, which can't be overlooked, and trample. Renati is going to be super solid in the deck because on top of giving our creatures counters, it's also going to give them haste if they have enough counters on them. Additionally, it's a mana dork, so you gotta love it. Defiler of Vigor, possibly one of the most broken cards in the deck. We just keep casting our creatures, it's lowering the cost of those creatures. I mean, we're paying life, but we don't care. and then we're just throwing a bunch of counters on our whole board. Next, we have our counter cards that say instead of putting 1 counter on something, we put 2 counters on something, which really means we're putting 4 counters on something. Ozolith the Shattered Spire. This one's super solid because it can also put counters on stuff on top of that ability we're looking for. Kami of Whispered Hopes. Not only does it have that ability, but we can add mana equal to its power, so we'll buff this to the moon and tap it for a ton of power. Hardened Scales, this one is a staple, you guys knew this would be here. Benevolent Hydra, another one that does the ability while also being able to put counters on stuff, super solid. Per Imaginative Rascal is very notable because it does counters, not just +1/+1 counters, which does matter for some of the cards in the deck. Champion of Liamholt, this one we just buff to the moon and all of our creatures are essentially unblockable. Family's Favor. I always find myself cutting this from a deck because it's never card advantage and it's never quite protection, right? You're giving one up for the other. But in this deck, it's perfect because we're going to get the protection and the card draw because when we remove one of those counters, we'll still have one on there. So it's amazing in this deck. Herd Baloth and Ivy Lane Denizen, on top of being amazing in the deck, they both go infinite together, so super solid. Colonial Hydra, this guy's amazing. He's just going to double our counters whenever he attacks, and then our commander's going to double them again, so it's going to get broken really fast. Vigor, this is going to make it to where all the damage dealt is dealt to Vigor and not our creatures, and then we'll just throw counters on our creatures, because why not? Rishgar, Pima Renegade, now we can tap those creatures with counters on them for mana, and he throws counters around, so you gotta love it. Tyrant Guard, super solid because we just sacrifice him and we basically got, a heroic intervention on a body. We can bring that guy back and make it super annoying. Paradox Zone, another terrible card that our commander can abuse. The first turn it comes in, we make a 4/4, and then we're going to put 6 counters on it and make a 16/16, and out of nowhere we've got a 34/34 on turn 3. You gotta love it. Kodama of the West Tree, now we're ramping whenever our creatures with counters are dealing damage to our opponents, and he gives them trample. Druid's Repository, this one's solid on its own, and then you add the fact that we're doubling it, and it just gets insane. Lux Cannon, I like this because honestly we're going to be taking out permanents and mono green. It sounds broken and it is broken. Fraying Line, this is essentially a board wipe that saves our commander, right? Because our opponents can try to put that rope counter on their creature, but when it does, our commander's ability will half it and they will get no counter. So they can't even save any of their creatures while we can save ours. It's a not one-sided board wipe, but it's a board wipe where we get to keep our creature. Super solid. Additionally, we're exiling stuff in mono green. Again, pretty insane. Moving on to the support cards in the deck, we have Fight Rigging. This is going to be super solid because our commander is a 6/6. We put 1 counter on him, which is going to be 2. He's going to turn into an 8/8, and we're instantly going to get that card for free. Conduit of Worlds. I like this because 1, it's going to let us play lands from our graveyard. Additionally, if we do lose one of our key pieces or our commander gets really high in cost, we can send it to the graveyard and cast it from our graveyard. We can only do that once per turn, but it's definitely worth it. Wildwood Scourge. This card is absolutely insane in the deck. Honestly, if we get a couple creatures on the battlefield and throw a counter on our whole board, this guy goes to the moon. We could easily get this guy to 100 power. It's not going to be that difficult. Additionally, when we do, we have a lot of Power Matters cards that can value off of that power, or just swing a 100/100 at your opponents for lethal. Evolutionary Sage. Land enters the battlefield, will proliferate, and then our commander will double that proliferation, well, double the counters. And, our board gets beefy pretty quick. Turvagon, this guy's amazing. 1, he replaces himself. I love that Ravenous ability. He's got trample, and then, when he deals combat damage to a player, you create that many 1/1 green Tyrannid creature tokens. Not very fun to deal with. Termagant Swarm, this one's kind of similar, but we're just going to cast this guy for a lot, we're going to replace him, and then we're going to sacrifice him for a whole or for an instant board state, right? Avenger of Zendikar, you guys know why this guy's in here. Throw a bunch of plant tokens onto the battlefield and start, putting counters on them. Moving on to our turn 2 ramp package, we have Incubation Druid, super solid early game, and then we can buffer up to go ahead and add 3 mana to our mana pool. Secure Tri-Builder, Old Reliable. Rampant Growth, I love this because, again, turn 2 ramp, Nature's Lore, and Emerald Medallion. I like Emerald Medallion here in monocolored decks, especially because it's going to reduce the cost of multiple spells a turn. People might overlook that, and that's honestly why the price is up there. Moving on to card advantage, we have Elemental Bond, Guruk's Pack Leader, and Guruk's Uprising. These are all going to draw us cards whenever a creature with power 3 or power 4 or greater enters the battlefield. That's going to synergize amazingly with putting counters on our creatures whenever they enter the battlefield. Rishkar's Expertise, Soul's Majesty, and Return of the Wild Speaker. These are just going to draw us cards equal to the greatest power among our creatures. Notably, our commander does enter the battlefield as a 6/6, so that's going to be pretty useful. Greater Good. We have some massive creatures in this deck, and if we're sacrificing 10/10s to draw 10 cards and discard 3, we don't even care that we're going to have to discard 3 cards. Moving on to removal, we have our breaking effects with Song of the Dryads and Kenrith's Transformation. Beast Within can get rid of any permanent that's causing us issues. Steelbane Hydra, I like this one because it sticks on the battlefield. We can put more counters on it, and we're not going to let any of those pesky artifacts or enchantments stick onto the battlefield. Voracious Hydra. This guy's going to enter the battlefield, he's going to be massive, and he's going to take a creature out whenever he enters the battlefield. Additionally, hey, maybe we've got, something on the battlefield that draws us cards equal to our greatest power. We'll double his counters, and then our commander's going to double it again. That's going to draw us a ton of cards, right? Ram Through. This card can just straight up kill people in this deck. All we need is, that Wildwood Scourge, get its power up to, 100, throw it at a creature they control, and they're out of here. Bane of Progress, super solid. It's going to synergize with our counters while also getting rid of any artifact or enchantment strategies. Aberrant, I like this guy. He replaces himself. He's super massive, and we're going to destroy any of those artifacts or enchantments. Azuri's Predation. I like this card in the deck because remember all of those cards that give creatures counters whenever they enter the battlefield? Now, whenever we cast Azuri's Predation, these are probably not going to be 4/4s. These are probably going to be closer to 6/6s to 7/7s. Who knows? Additionally, we get to keep those, right? Because they're not killing 7/7s. When you cast this in their 4/4s, yeah, some of them die. But in this deck, they're going to stick around and they're going to be massive. That's going to do it for the deck tech. As always, if you want to support me, you can do that through the TCG player link. Like, comment, and subscribe. And as always, I hope this helped you in your deck building endeavors.